Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Speaker Space. The Speaker program is sponsored by our partner, Clipsal by Schneider Electric. I'm Sandra, I'm the editor of Denfair, and I'm very excited to have Gavin Harris and Angela Ferguson from Futurespace here with me today. If you've had a wander out to the workspace precinct, which is actually new in 2019 for Denfair, you will have seen a massive installation, beautiful leafy arches, and these two are responsible for the design of that. It reflects the spirit, the things that are unique to the Australian workspace today, and I will leave it to these two to explain and talk their way through it. Thanks, Angela and Gavin.
Thank you, Sandra. I should just say too, it's not just me and Gav who did this, it's our Futurespace team. So Emily, Margarita, Nikki, Cass, Jared, and plus team back in Sydney as well. So what we'll do today is just take you through how Gav and I work together, how this whole thing came about, what the purpose and the reason for it is. And I do just want to preface it with, we've had a lot of late nights and early mornings, so there's a bit of dustiness in my head, particularly this morning. And I need to multitask. So we've called this installation Future Work because Futurespace, we're an interior architectural advisory practice. We focus on workplace and we believe very much in the power of the working environment to influence people's lives in a positive way. So what we've done through Future Work is really just, it came about because we had a few conversations with Claudio and Thibaut, the organisers of Den, and we realised that we were kind of on the same level when it came to the value of design and good design and how it's about telling stories and influencing people and trying to communicate a message to a really broad audience. So before even Future Work came about, we were just having these conversations about design, and it evolved into us being invited into participating in this event. So initially, what am I pointing this at? Can you do that for me? Thanks. See, multitasking. So look, initially the brief was to include work in Denfair in a really interesting, appealing way. And the guys have always talked about it as being an activation rather than as a static display. And the idea was that it was progressive, it was forward-thinking, it's creative, inspiring, educational, but functional as well, so that we could do things like have business meetings and engage with other progressive workplace brands. We know that the audience are mostly designers, but who already have a certain level of understanding around design. But I think if you haven't designed a workplace before or worked on a really complex workplace, maybe the issues that go into designing workplaces are not so obvious. So we wanted to try and communicate some of those things as well. So initially, we set a big brief for ourselves to include everything we knew about workplace, which ended up being a little bit too ambitious. And if you some of the trends that we're looking at right now in workplace design are around agility and around mobility. We're also talking about things like health and well-being and culture, connectivity in big workplaces, so getting people to move up and down via stairs rather than through lifts. We're talking about how big data can be collected and influence workplace design, the domestication of the workplace, biophilia, placemaking, technology enhancing the experience. So these are all kind of current things we're talking about in workplace design. Not to mention some of the emerging trends we're seeing. And so to try and fit all of those things into a 90 square metre space was a bit of a big ask. So what we then ended up doing was just pulling that back a little bit. And can you go to the next slide? And looking at some really exemplar projects when it came to exhibition design. So the first one is the MIES Pavilion in Barcelona. So has anyone been to this? No? Okay. I'm sure most of you would be familiar with this. And what's really interesting about this project is that it was done in the early 1900s at a time when everything in interior design was highly decorative. So to then have this piece of design that was really about materiality and minimalism and things being pared back was so controversial. So it really kind of sparked a conversation about design and what design is. The next one is the M Pavilion here in Melbourne. So this is a rendering of the most recent one. So you guys would all be mostly Melbourne people, mostly familiar with M Pavilion. So the thing we love about the M Pavilion is that it's a space where it's about creating community and about people coming together and about conversations happening and amazing architecture and design in a really inspiring way, but that influences and informs people's behaviour. The next one is the RIG Design Prize, which was, I think it finished around February here. And so what the designers were asked to do here was to respond to a brief about their creative process. And this one by Hector Phelan was the winner. And it just centred around this one concept of the table and how the table was about people coming together. The materiality was quite singular as well. And it really just talked to an idea of what their design position was as a practice. And then the last one, actually I just want to point out too that I have been to all of these places, so I'm not just making these judgments off Instagram or social media. So I do, Gavin and I both really believe in the experience of a space and how, it's got to be a three-dimensional experience rather than just a 2D kind of looking at an image. So this was from, this is Jaime Hayon's installation from Milan in 2017 for Caesar Stone. And again, this was about a materiality, but it's a playground theme. And so how is this material used to, transmit this idea of materiality and playfulness and the potential for this Caesar stone, which you think is a really hard kind of non-malleable material, but you can see here it's been used in really kind of interesting ways. So we used these things to really refine our brief and to really kind of pare things back and look at what we wanted to communicate through this this activation about workplace. We went through a series of Futurespace projects and tried to kind of reflect on a lot of the workplaces we designed for a range of different clients. So we work, for legal clients, for tech clients, for professional services, for engineering and mining and advertising. And what we saw was that each of these clients had gone through this really specific briefing process to determine what the workplace needed to do specifically for them and how it aligns with their business. So we're really looking at how the workplace has a function to deliver on performance and not just what something looks like. And once we started to reflect through these projects, we saw that some really common themes started to emerge. And those common themes were around focus, socialise and collaborate. And it became evident that these are the three main reasons why people come to work. They come to work with other people, so to collaborate and co-create and come up with new ideas. They come to work to socialise, so that's a relatively new trend in workspace design, that idea of making these friendships and social connections and the work being able to contribute to your own personal life. And then, of course, we also need to focus at work. We need to be able to do deep thought. We need to be able to do quiet work. And, we need to be able to have the headspace to come up with new ideas and new thinking. I work at home a fair bit, as well as in the studio, and I often find that sometimes when I work at home, that's actually the noisiest place, because you're home during the day, there's all the tradies kind of building, in the apartments around you, and the gardener, the lawnmower's going off, and there's dogs barking, and quite often it's actually much quieter in the middle of the CBD than it is out in the suburbs. So I find that a really interesting contrast. So anyway, so we started to then play with these three themes of focus, socialise and collaborate, and just looked at some of the activities around those. And these images here, the focus pod was really just about coming to one point. The socialise thing is about people coming together around a table, and then the collaborate's a very active, very engaging kind of idea. So each of these things that we do at work, these three activities, they have some real spatial qualities to them. So I'm going to have to get up because I can't read that from here. But so just looking at some of the things we do to focus at work, we're reading, we're writing, we're drawing, we're thinking, we're doing that really solitary, contemplative type work, concentrative work. Socialising has more of a domestic feel to it, and it brings that whole story of health and well-being into the workplace. It's got to be stimulating and quite central, but then also looking at the social activities that we undertake, and whether that's sharing a meal or sharing a coffee, playing board games. The talk that we talked about, or the panel session that we had earlier, talked about designing activities into the workspace for creativity, like painting and origami and some other fun activities. So that's all part of the socialisation of work, which is a newish trend. And then collaborating. So being able to not only create together, but to learn together and to really kind of participate in having a sense of meaning and sense of purpose at work. And that's a really important part of workspace design today. Next. Are you doing this one? Yep, good. Very collaborative, we are.
Yeah. Very organised too. So with all that thinking, then we had to look at site. So context is always interesting on spaces. So we were having a look at, well, where is this going to sit? How is it going to be viewed? What is the journey to it? So this is all part of the things. This is a bit of an earlier plan. If you go up there now, you'll see a bit of a different workplace space, which actually is better and actually is an amazing kind of connective process. Actually, it feels almost like a workplace in its own agile way, which is really great. So you can see what we're trying to do with the 3 points: social, focus, collaborate, 3 zones, 3 vistas, connections, and how are you going to have that journey. So that's important. All right, cool. So then, okay, let's get some paper out and start sketching. So this is some of the original ideas, and we were starting to work with, we're thinking about with the building behind here, the space cube and so forth. And how does that work? It's a building material we're used to working with, steel and glass, and it goes different sections. We looked at that, and then we went back into some of that, what Angela was talking about in those lists, and about domesticity and softness and collection and the human aspect of it. And so we went back to the drawing board, still having the 3 ideas, but what came out of it was really important was, we're talking about X and Y and Z axes, which gives us that rectangular space. But when you start looking at domestic and also what's on trend and what's happening, and we're actually sitting in a very good example of it at the moment, softness. It's about how we touch, how we feel this space. So the reason that arbor or the arch came about was to soften that effect. It's not a cube, it is actually more inclusive. And then when we started developing that into, the social, we brought the greenery in. Collaboration was a very tricky one in that at the moment it was sitting over us. And secondly, we also divorced it from the platforms. And when you go over there, if you haven't already been, you'll see it's hanging. It's actually floating. Again, another thing that's showing a soft touch. And when you look at a lot of workplaces today, the spaces and the connections are soft. They're not hard connections anymore to how we work. And that's kind of representing that. A bit more sketching. You can see how we're playing with different heights and how we calibrated. Originally, collaborate was in the middle and focus at the end. And we felt focus was still a central element for the workplace. So we brought that back to that center part. And when you go over there now, you'll see collaborate. Actually, we tipped it on its side, so now it's enveloping you, which means we're using the walls, which is what part of the activation is. Here's a really, this is one of my iPad sketches, so this is me playing with the iPad for like a couple of hours, so that wasn't very productive, but it was a bit of fun. But you can see what we're trying to do here is unlock the color palette that links to those type of activities as well. And what we did was then start bringing in, the collaborate. What is collaboration? What's the best colors? What does it link us to? How do we connect to it? And we've used softer tones. Timber, you'll see, is in all 3, and that was a linking factor. Again, like everything, you need a base to let things come off so you feel you're connected, even though you're doing separate things. And then we've got a reflective floor over there, which is a vinyl at the moment. We used a reflective because part of collaboration is a reflective process. It's also, when you stand there, it's looking at a different view. You're changing the concept of where you are, and you can see yourself upside down. And that's all part of collaboration because you're getting out of that process.
Gav, can I just say, just on the colour too, that was a really important part of it, because pink is around creativity and energy and that mental, being inspired mentally. So the colour choices are really important to connect to each of the 3 pods. And then the blue, which is just about, Gav will just talk about, blue is about calm and about being able to really kind of focus. So it related really beautifully to that focus moment.
That's why I'm wearing blue today.
Yeah, dark blue.
Because I'm calm. No? Okay, I'm not calm. All right. Yeah, so
Your feet are extra calm.
They're really calm. They're actually really comfortable, so I like it. So it almost matches. Okay, no fun. So you can see we used blue, and also the materials were softer. You know, it's all padded inside. It's a womb-like. It's feeling like you're comfortable. I can be there by myself, or it could be 2 people, but it's not much more than that. And we also have music. So that's the other level. You'll see light, and you'll see music. You'll see the greenery. There's actually smell because of the greenery as well. Yeah. They're all the other senses that you're triggering now. And we never used to trigger them in workplace. We are triggering those things now, and it's important.
The music is the Baroque music. So Baroque music is apparently the best music for you to be able to focus and the least distracting. We actually tried it in the Sydney studio. So we run Spotify over the speakers, and I think we had it on for about half an hour. It just got really annoying. But so maybe it's good for focusing for short periods of time, not for the entire workday.
I wasn't wearing blue. So
no, Gav wasn't there that day.
No. So, and then the other one, social. So that's the one where we're coming together. We've got the obviously planting. We've got the smell of that. We've got a high bench. We've got, it's the classic around the table. So we've used a high table. You're standing at it. You can sit at it. People can come up to you easily. Simple, soft lighting. So that's, it's welcoming. And then really this is some of the detail work before we went into final documentation. You can see we changed and turned collaboration on its side. It's enclosed in focus, and then we opened it up. And the other part too was also, it was designed to photograph, we hope photograph very well. It was classic, Instagrammable kind of thing, and bring people together, which is part of that process as well. And you can see how we hung it all, which was a bit of a crazy idea. But it went very well. And then final artwork before we went into production, connecting, and we also blurred the edges. There's a number of settings on either side. And again, that's that blurred edge within workplace, between settings, between areas of work. They're never hard lines.
And also connecting to what else was going on in that workplace precinct. So not wanting to have just this really kind of singular defined space, but that whole workplace zone being treated as a precinct and connecting into each other, which I think the guys at Den have done really well. If you haven't been over there, I think it's working nicely how everything's kind of feeding into each other.
And I think the other thing too is talk about the collaboration. If you go over there, there's a number of questions being asked. And we would love some input with that because we're doing some work and we want to bring that into it. And Angela may talk about that a bit more, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now? Oh, okay. All right. So if I can just, the 3 pods. So the first one is the socialised pod, which we've mentioned with the greenery. This one is the focus pod. So the idea, as Gav touched on, it's about being a really singular experience where you just kind of go in and get a bit of relief from everything going on around here. And this last one is all geared towards collaboration. So we've got some questions up in this wall where we're asking people to just write on a post-it note how they want to respond to these different questions about how they feel about workspace. And some of the things we were talking about in the panel before were about meaningful work and what work means and how design can kind of play into that. And so I think our experience as workplace designers is work is such a kind of boring word. How many times you say, I've got to go to work today, or nobody ever's jumping for joy saying, yes, I'm going to work. And I favourite website is dictionary.com because I'm a geek like that. And I often go onto the thesaurus, and if you go into the thesaurus and you look up the word work and you see all the other words that mean work, you've got chore and toil and labour and effort. None of this is fun stuff, right? And all the words that have work in them are like housework and homework. None of those are fun things either. But we do actually do cool stuff at work, right? So what we're wanting to do through this activation here is to have people come and let us know how they're feeling about their own workspaces and their own experience of work, to try and collect some of that data and then maybe to be able to use that in a more interesting, creative way. The other thing too that we've found, we're living in this era where we're dominated and led by technology. But the digital and the analog are just as important as each other these days. The face-to-face is just as important as the virtual. So I wish 20 years ago I had have bought shares in Post-it notes, because if you guys have travelled around at all, you've probably seen workplaces that have just got walls covered in Post-it notes. And people writing things on Post-its and sticking them on the walls. So, and they're not cheap things, right, if you've ever gone to Officeworks and had to purchase them. But so we use Post-it notes a lot in the way that we communicate in a really analog way. So when you go over after this talk, we'd love you to answer some of those questions. And we've got pens, we've got Post-its, and just help engage with the collaboration aspect of the experience.
And the other part too is the overlay of graphics. We were very lucky to have Marcus Piper do the graphics for us. And this is another important part that's in work environments now, is the branding and the messaging and the stories that we want to tell. So, part of this was developing up a language for the graphics, being clear and concise on what each section was. And these are actually graphics that were developed. They're on the floor when you see them. They're actually the vinyls. But then also you can see how we've brought the colors and the tones into that, as well as the softness and the blurring of lines, which I've talked about before, because spaces are never hard, they blur. So that's the messaging where we develop for the graphics. And then obviously we always have to have some social media stuff to get that out, and we made that happen, getting a simple language. And then, even this, play with the graphics lets us own that graphic, lets us, give a customization to it. And of course, all this can't be done without our partners. It was built with many people and it helped by a lot of people, and we like to thank them all. They're all here, but they're also up there, so be very clear, and we thank them for that support. And then last bits, we go to Q&A.
Yeah, so look, that just kind of explains. So Gavin and I have been working together for about 10 years, and we each have our things that we prefer to do on a project, and we each have our strengths on a project, and there are things that Gav loves to do that I don't. So I think we actually work well as a team. So we'd love to hear any of your questions about, whether it's about the way we work in the studio, or whether it's about work, or the design that we've just presented today. The other thing actually I did want to say too is that it's always a work in progress, so you don't come up with these ideas and then it just magically happens. So there's been a lot of, more Gav than me and the team, there's been a lot of sort of late nights and decisions made on site, and our questions are actually on the inside rather than the outside, so then you just kind of have to adapt and go with the flow. But yeah, it's still a work in progress, and we're still, figuring out the best way to engage as the show continues over the next few days too.
I have a question. I'm over here.
Oh, there you are.
I'm fascinated by that idea of that you brought up about design being a data collecting tool. So about physical spaces being porous, inviting interaction, and then you guys actually using that to inform your next projects. Can you speak a little bit to that and to how that might have been the case in other work that you've done, and how that sort of influenced the trajectory for you both?
Yeah, I think it's so I'm doing a PhD at the moment at RMIT. So some of that's really is what triggered this data collection, because I think a lot of the times what happens, particularly in workplace design, is you design something and then people start using it, and then that's it, it's forgotten about. It's not then continued to be reviewed and reflected on and adapted and changed. So the idea of us collecting the data is that we kind of know, anecdotally, how people feel about workplaces and workspaces, and we hear stories, and We have our own observations, but it is really important to get proper feedback from people about, what they do really think and really feel, so that it can be used to create better spaces for people. I think as designers, like we have an employment policy at Futurespace, which we've had for a long time, which Michelle knows, which is no prima donnas. And so we believe that, the design is not about us. It's actually about us helping a client realise their vision and their goals. We've obviously got expertise and talent and skill around that, but we're really designing for the client. We're not designing for ourselves. So that's a really important part of what we do. So the data and the research is a huge part of us being able to do that effectively and authentically. Anyone else? That's a good question. Do you want to? Okay, so the question was, what about people who don't work in funky, groovy designer spaces? That's a really good question. Yeah, because look, not every workplace is Google, and not every client of ours is a Google type client. So we really authentically believe in designing for that client. So if you're a law firm and all of your partners want offices, and you have the space to do that and you have the budget to do that, and that's your brief, then that's what the design ends up being. So we might challenge a client to perhaps think differently about some things in some areas, which is going to benefit them. But not I think there's this sort of theory that, everyone has to be Google or Facebook. It's not actually, it's not what we believe in either.
Well, there's a lot of times there's thought that, I need to, we'll say the cafe, I want a pool table in the cafe, because I'm going to bring people together. Now, some businesses, yes, that'll happen, like a tech company. That would work really well. If it was an accounting practice, that's not probably the model. But they want something else that they may want to have very good coffee. So you bring in you have a proper coffee, or you bring in the right service. So it's back to where Angela was talking about. It's listening and getting the brief right for that client, not just, that was all cool, you need to have one of those as well, because it will not work. Because it will not work with their culture. And if it doesn't get supported by culture, it will fail, and then that's a negative in that environment. So that's the kind of the trick, I think. So. Yeah.
Just designing something that's appropriate for that client and their people, and understanding that culture is very different per business and per organisation. So with all the work that we do too, with lots of different types of clients, we've found that there's really 3 common things that people are challenged by, that business is challenged by, that the workplace can help solve. And that's around people and behaviour and technology and generations. It's around culture and brand, and how people want to do meaningful work. So they want to work for people or for businesses that stand for something, and where the culture and the brand is obvious. And then health and well-being. So that's a huge part of workplace design today, in terms of what are the appropriate health and well-being initiatives that go along with that workplace design. And no matter what sector you're in, these are the issues that businesses are facing, and these are the issues that workplace design can help resolve.
Still got time for some more questions?
Oh, over there.
Sorry.
Oh, what's on Spotify?
What's on Spotify now?
Oh,
Is
well,
it
we
on
usually
all day?
do. It's on all day. We usually do. I've got a few favourite mixes that Melanie knows. There's Chill AF. My initials are AF, so I think that's been named after me. And then dinner with friends. That's a good one. It's pretty relaxed. It's nothing kind of too boppy or, we're not an ad agency or a PR company. We actually are trying to get some work done. So it's more stuff that's kind of background, and I think someone was talking about earlier in the earlier session, when you're in a cafe, the noise level in a cafe can actually help you focus. So that's what our music's designed to do, is help you focus.
We should release a Futurespace, Spotify playlist. I think that's the suggestion.
That's a great
here.
idea.
Yeah.
Awesome. Done.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Obviously working in workplace probably going on 5 years ago, and where activity-based working and non-assigned desks were quite high and popular at the time. Do you think the progression at the going on from then is sort of still leading in that way, or do you find that there's a pushback now? Because I know that it used to be unassigned desks, and then it got pushed back with a lot of the people and staff not really going down that path. Is that, I guess, something that is progressive going down that way, or are we going in a different direction now?
It goes back to a little bit the other question we had before. It's about the right answer for the client. And when that came out, ABW and agile working, it was kind of like, oh, it's new, it's fantastic, we all should be doing it. But actually, when you look at what people do and what their main tasks are and what they need to support those tasks is all different, and that may not support that type of environment. Like you say, legal, a good one. Fairly singular work, you need to focus. A lot of times we're doing dictation out loud, audio, or we're having very private meetings, with a client. Well, an open environment where you have to find a new desk all the time is not going to support that. So it's that correct listening and sorting, matching the client and the process of how they work. Also, within a business, there's different variances of that agility. Some departments will be more agile than others. So you can't just do a flat strap across the whole business. It needs to be tuned into neighborhoods or clusters or groups as well. So I think, and it's getting smarter. The products that support this kind of agile working are getting cleverer. They're getting better quality, because I think we were talking about it before over there. With workplace, saying assigned desking and you've got your own storage, you're taking away some ownership. So what is the business giving back to you? Where's their commitment to you? And that's been a big question mark. And that's why, good cafes and gyms and all this kind of thing have happened with businesses. But the quality of furniture, if you have a beautiful piece of furniture, a great edge detail, and you feel like it, it's a value. The company has given a value back to you wherever you're in that work environment. So that's the new changes that are subtly coming through.
And I think that term too, of ABW or agile or activity-based, it's really started to lose its meaning. I was talking to someone recently who was telling me that, showing me something they had done, not in our studio, and was saying this is an ABW workplace. And I was saying, well, what makes this an activity-based workplace? And he said, well, because this is their desk where they sit, and then when they want to do something else, they go to a different room. It's like, that's just a workplace. Agile is kind of a way of thinking and a way of behaving, and it's kind of a bigger story than just being able to move around and having diversity. So I think there's only really a dozen maybe true examples of agile activity-based, whatever you want to call it, working, and everything else is just really diverse, interesting workplaces that give people a lot of choice. So we're trying not to label things anymore and just making things really kind of bespoke and individual. It's a good question. Thanks.
Hi. Just wanted to know, have you developed projects where you integrate technology, for example, a home assistant but in an office space or something like that, and how does that work in a work environment?
So technology is a huge part of workplace design, and we often talk about designing people and place and technology. So in tandem, so the physical environment, the behaviour, and then the technology to support that flexibility and allowing people to be more mobile. We use that Futurespace because we've got Sydney and Melbourne studios. We have a big screen like this one here that has a Zoom room into each studio. So if Gav wants to talk, to example, to Margarita, he just goes and knocks on the screen. We each unmute our screen and we can have a conversation like you and I, would be having, just standing here facing each other. So technology has really kind of allowed us to connect a lot better and in a lot more real time, rather than having to book a meeting and set up a Skype call and do all these things. So technology is a fundamental part of making work meaningful today. It's a really good point. Do you want to add to that?
Well, I think the technology's only been around for the last couple of 3 or 4 years, really, to make to make it natural, like it should be natural, and that's what Angela was just saying. You know, it's a bit like my own private phone, but it's really cool. But we also do presentations of it, and we also mark up drawings. So it is like if we're around the table, but that's only in the last few years. And I think it comes back to the simplicity and the naturalness of technology in a workspace that you can walk into it and you know how to use it straight away. Now that is something that's still developing. It's going to be a long time till we get there. But that is the trick. And then once we've got that, we'll be good. It's like we'll use the Apple phone. There's no instruction for the Apple phone because it's been designed to be intuitive. That is where technology needs to be in the workplace. Some of it's there. We're not quite there yet. So, but it's a big piece of work for us now.
Still taking questions? Anyone? Had some really great ones today.
Can I ask, has anyone got an awesome workplace that they work in that they really love? That's good to know. There's a few. Does anyone want to share what they love about their workplace? Yeah?
Hi, Jackie from MKDC Design in Perth. So we're workplace consultants and designers. And it kind of occurred to us, I think, at WorkTech 17, that we weren't really walking the walk. We were talking the talk. And so we introduced, I guess, pretty much a transformation for us very quickly, going into Surface Pros and going fully agile and testing lots of different technologies on ourselves, which we're continuing to do. And I think what's interesting is that in a year and a half, say, Kath, that we've been doing it, we've actually gone into a weekly agile, we call it, where we change desks weekly because we got really sick of cleaning up our desks every day. But actually the benefits of cleaning up our desk once a week, we still reap the rewards of starting Monday with Zen cleanliness, which is something that, as someone who was telling the story to clients of what we should be doing, I hadn't felt that. And then it's nice to be able to authentically tell a story about how we've tested on ourselves, and that's what we got. And actually now we really like our workplace because we can kind of respond to what we all want as a communal group and change things, which I think is really cool, that flexibility.
And so how many people have you got there?
Oh, we're pretty small. We got 14. Have we got 14? Yeah. But we're all interior designers, and it's just a really nice experimental lab to be able to test out all these theories that we sort of talk about to our clients and sort of respond to them and see what they're like, really.
That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that.
No worries.
Watch out, Futurespace. We might do that too. Has anyone else got a great workspace they want to talk about or share? I'm sure I saw another hand. Yeah.
Kathy Kaczynski from MKDC. Interested in your comment about clients wanting bespoke workspaces, particularly when there's so much co-working space being rolled out into a myriad of buildings. I'd just like your comments on that, please.
Okay. Co-working is, I think that's a whole other session in itself, because I think a lot of the co-working was initially designed to be about creating communities, and there's different levels of co-working. So there's different brands of co-working that are targeting different audiences, and some are doing it better than others. But I think there's now starting to be this thinking that co-working is really just cool serviced offices. So it really depends on where you go. We actually use co-working space here in Melbourne, and I don't think we're so interested in engaging with everybody else there. We just want our own space, right? And our own and we bring everything ourselves, but we have great shared kitchens and facilities and things like that we probably wouldn't have if we were just in our own environment. But like co-working, I think is interesting in that It's like everything, really. There's good and bad examples of everything. A lot of our clients are using co-working space to spill over because, if they're sort of expanding temporarily, they use that as short-term space. But there really is that move back towards everyone, like the permanent workforce, all being co-located, coming together, rather than being dispersed across the CBD. So I think co-working has a purpose and it fills a need. But to me, it's more of a short-term solution rather than a really long-term strategy. Yeah.
Can we please thank Angela and Gavin today from Futurespace for their time? And do make sure to head over to the workspace area. It's pretty cool what they've done. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.